A thought skitters across your mind. No doubt the same thought currently crossing a lot of people's minds. Someone lied, or at least hid the truth. This is not the job you signed up for, and there's no time to react. Back up 60 seconds. Your 3-day march has ended, finally. It's early morning, and the jingle-jangle of the bulky sack of coins strapped to your waist is sounding sweeter with every span you cross. A hefty down payment, to say the least. But you steel your mind and remind yourself that you aren't even quite halfway there. Still, you can't stop thinking about what you're going to do with the small fortune you'll have when the other half is placed in your hand. So far, the job's been a breeze, too. A conservation mission, as far as you know, something about collecting samples from a nearby forest. They even brought an elven druid along to consult and oversee they don't take too much from the land. But that's not why you're here. You're here in case violence erupts. Orcs, goblins, bugbears, whatever sadistic creature the wilds can throw at you, you face it down before. But so far, your only purpose has been something akin to supporting simple peace of mind. You've hardly had to lift a finger, save the task of lifting a flask from hip to lips. A task you are now wishing you had performed about 60 seconds ago. Standing in front of a marvel of a tree, enormous and almost human-like, a small brigade of scholars, scouts, laborers, and mercenaries bustling about, you wish, when you first saw a quiver along the tree line, that you had thought something of it, instead of nothing. When another shakes, you wish amid all the hustle of the axemen making their way to the forest, that someone else had noticed as well. By the time you caught the blood-drained visage of the druid, his stare of awe and paralyzing terror, you heard only a loud whisper. "It's an awakening." And the first stone had been cast. Literally, as a massive boulder comes flying out of the forest wall, striking with deadly accuracy. Crushing a cart with horses still hitched, rolling through no less than 5 or 6 people. Another, and another, and another as huge humanoid trees come lumbering out of the brush, swinging their long limbs wildly. Limp shapes of hired hands sailing across the grove. Deep, groaning war cries drowning out the panic of the camp. Time slows for a moment as you watch every bough and trunk in sight shake with unimaginable fury. And a thought skitters across your mind. No doubt the same thought currently crossing a lot of people's minds. Someone lied, or at least hid the truth. This is not the job you signed up for, and there's no time to react. Roll for initiative.
Hey there, creatures, and welcome to Encounter This, a podcast exploration of the creatures from Dungeons & Dragons and the lore that surrounds them. Before we get into this episode, I'd just like to take a minute to thank this week's sponsor, Libris Arcana. They offer a super affordable dice subscription service as well as standalone polyhedral sets. I've been a subscriber since their inception, and I can say I really look forward to my set in the mail every month. Check them out at librisarcana.com. That's librisarcana.com.
We'll have to start with the pronunciation.
Treants, I believe.
That's what I have always called them. That's what I'm most comfortable calling them. I did a quick Google search just today, just to double check. And most people seem to agree that it's pronounced Treants, even though it's an A.
I would love to call it Treants, but I feel like that's pretty Tolkienian.
Yes, understandably so, as we'll get to. But yeah, that's...
Please don't sue us, Tolkien. please don't do it.
We're your friends. Yeah, Treants. However you want to say it, it's your game at the end of the day.
Regional dialects aside, we are Canadian, and we now pronounce it as Treants. I feel comfortable making that statement for all of Canada.
Absolutely. Anyway, we're going to start, as usual, with the 5th edition lore. And the lore in this goes way back to 1st edition. And it's full of shit.
The TSR stuff?
Yeah, the TSR stuff.
Gygax loves you, Token. Just give him hobbits.
Seriously.
Let him have this one.
So we'll start with the 5e official stuff, and then we will dive into the stuff I found out of Forgotten Realms Wiki, and in particular, a lot of it comes from a book called Elminster's Ecology, which was published by TSR in 1994, and it was meant to extend the lore of 2nd edition.
I don't want to make this episode take any longer, but could you give us a quick primer on TSR, like for the listeners who have never heard of the pre-Wizards?
You would know more about that than I would.
Okay.
So no.
Just for the listeners who don't know, TSR was the company formed by Don Kay and Gary Gygax in 1972, which is the precursor. Well, it was later on bought by Wizards of the Coast after it started to fall behind. But it's crazy that Treants go that far back.
Yeah, no, TSR was essentially, it was just meant for them to find a way to publish the work and the rules specifically, I think, for Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, because originally they were using the chainmail system, and then Wilderness and Survival, I think, was the other game for hex crawls.
In any case, Elementary Psychology plays a huge role in a lot of the lore that I found, and it gets into some very specific biological parts, I suppose, and the ecology parts appropriately. But starting with the 5e lore, treants are specifically awakened trees in ancient forests. They dwell for days, months, and even years in quiet contemplation, just sitting there, not doing a whole lot, just thinking. But they are fierce guardians of the forests, and especially against outside threats. Trees that are destined to become treants meditate for decades, and sometimes even centuries, before they realize their potential. The realizing of that potential is known as an awakening. And this also only occurs under special circumstances. I assume would be dictated by the DM. There wasn't any mention of it in the monster manual. Or it can happen in a nature that is steeped in magic. Understandably, powerful druids and other treants can sense the potential of a tree and will spend a lot of time protecting them as they wait to become awakened. As far as physical description goes, there's not really a whole lot that is said in the monster manual. When they go through the process of awakening, they do start to form face, legs, arms, even before they wake up. The artwork in the monster manual specifically, you can note that I didn't notice it the first time I had seen it, but he's got 3 arms, essentially 3 branches that form into arms. So they're not limited to just a simple humanoid look. And when they're ready, they uproot and start protecting the forest with their fellow treants. And treants continue to grow even after they awaken. I believe this is straight from the book. It's essentially, even if they're created from the mightiest of trees, quote unquote, they can achieve immense size and gain innate magical power and magical power over plants and animals, using those powers to ensnare or trap intruders, and even sending messages across great distances, which I imagine we might get into when we talk about the mechanics.
Crazy. So, how is a treant formed? How's that made?
It very specifically says under special circumstances or in a nature steeped in magic. So it has to be DM's discretion, essentially. Okay. They are specifically formed from a tree. You would kind of assume they're coming from a big, massive, ancient tree, but it doesn't specify that. They can, and it can take anywhere from decades to centuries of any kind, really. So
Gotcha. So there's no like mechanical way that the players could make a treant or anything like that?
Not as far as I found in any of the lore or any, especially the 5th edition, like mechanics.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's really open to interpretation. Even after the awakening of a treant, they will spend a long time just chilling as a tree. They just won't even uproot right away. They will just hang out. And while they're in this state, they are fully aware of their surroundings, though. And they can even sense effects taking place miles or kilometers away. Outside forces who don't cause too much ruckus they won't become a target of the ire of these treants, such as like woodcutters who don't go after great and healthy trees, or hunters that take only what they need and no more. They're fine. But if you get greedy, you will definitely face their wrath, and especially those who would poison a forest or obviously are careless with fire. And especially, it said, I believe it used the word especially, someone who will fuck with a tree close to awakening. It didn't say fuck. It did say especially.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, well, spoilers for later on down the line, there is a creature that's not 5th edition owned. It's by Cobalt Press. That is when you fuck with that specific ritual that we'll talk about when we get into my experience with it.
Oh, sweet. Okay, I have no idea what that is. Can't wait.
You don't remember? I thought...
Oh, was that the one we encountered?
Yeah,
the
Mandriano.
Yeah. Okay, no, you definitely still know more about that than I do.
Okay,
so
cool.
That's exciting. I don't think I ever got to the behind the scenes on that. Not too much, anyway.
No, that's a fun one. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. As far as the relationship with other creatures go, obviously, definitely close with druids to a degree, and dryads and elves in general. Anything that's sort of would probably exist in the material world but has a relation to the Fae. Some treants will be willing to allow whole communities of sprites even live among the branches. And that actually comes from the sprite entry in the Monster Manual. So it's a little bit of a spoiler. I'm sure we'll cover sprites eventually. But yeah, they will allow whole communities, select communities, to just live amongst their trees.
Oh, fuck, that's... This is why you listen to Encounter This, listeners. Fuck, that's cool.
This is why we read the Monster Manual, man. It's so great. It's
I wish
so
you
cool.
could see my face. The wheels are just firing on all cylinders
And
now.
now I can't wait to get to my experience because I very much used that when I was in Australia with my crew. So it was great. But that's basically most of it for the 5th edition lore. From there, we get into the Forgotten Realms wiki, and especially the 2nd edition book of Elminster's Ecology, and it covers specifically Cormanthor. Cormanthor is basically.
Are we diving into Elminthor's ecology? Elminthor?
Elminster.
Elminster.
This is
Okay, so we're diving into Elminster's ecology, and this is a supplement for AD&D.
2nd edition, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is 2nd edition AD&D?
I think they're essentially the same.
Write in and correct us very gently.
I haven't done that much
Be
research.
delicate. Be delicate with us, listeners.
We are, for all intents and purposes, amateurs.
5e,
Doing our best.
4e, and 3.75e is really where our experience lies.
But in any case, Cormanthor, in a lore sense, it used to be the seat of an elven empire, but it's largely abandoned. It is made up of 4 forests: the Elven Court, Semberholm, the Tangled Trees, and the Vale of Lost Voices. But it's also divided into 3 rough divisions based on the types of trees in the area. There's the Rimwood, which is mostly pine and is the least dense. Midwood, which is beech and ash, very dense and mostly unbroken canopy. And the Starwood, which is maple and oak mostly, and is the most dense part. And then it goes on to describe what types of treants you will find in those sections of the wood. The Rimwood, you'll find birch-like treants, contrary to the high pine population. They have very long roots used for reaching water underground, and their sap smelled of lemon and mint.
That sounds delightful.
It is delightful, isn't it? I thought that was a nice touch. Midwood had golden willow and black lotus treants in appearance. They did not mention anything about the beech or ash. That seems to be common in that area.
Okay.
Their bark could be boiled to make gold or black dyes, respectively. And generally, they were passive, but were really quick to confront evil. And in the Starwood, you had dark brown oak and gray elm for treants, no mention of maple. Half of them were peaceful like Midwood, and the rest were quite hostile. And according to Elminster's Ecology, the Starwood contains so many potential enemies. This was why. They would basically attack first.
And those are the hardest of the... If I know my woods like I think I do, which I don't, I think those are the 2 hardest woods you mentioned. So these are like treant barbarians.
I would imagine, yeah. They're probably pretty damn tough, yeah.
If you ever run into a treant barbarian listener, just use the disengage action and get the fuck out of there.
I might have missed it earlier, but it just made me think of, I think in the Monster Manual, it's specifically, somewhere in my notes, it specifically says that a treant's wood, it's actually coming right here. Never mind. In the general idea of treants across Cormanthor, their wood would appear as solid stone. So, yeah, they looked really hard and probably were extremely tough. They have tubes that run through them that carry water to all the important parts of them, which I thought was really cool because it really gives like a really more humanoid, like they've got vital organs kind of.
Yeah, so we're talking about legitimate anatomy structures here now. We're talking about like a venous system? Venus?
System of veins.
System of veins.
Carrying important liquids to the important parts of the body, yes. And those tubes were actually vulnerable to a disease called tube wilt. It was a fungal disease, and it would rot them from the inside out. And get this, a treant could die within months from tube wilt. These things can be centuries, probably millennia old, even before they turn into a treant. And then this one disease can take them out in months. But they had a way of combating it, which were rot grubs. And they would let rot grubs enter their tubes, and they would just eat any kind of rotten wood, and it would just consume the fungus with it.
That's awesome. And rot grubs are still a feature of 5th edition today.
Yeah.
That's cool.
100%. And the grubs would remain inside them for good. They would live in a symbiotic relationship. They would just continue eating any other wood that would rot, even if it was nothing to do with the tube wilt. I think this comes straight from Elminster's Ecology. It says larger treants could have thousands of grubs living inside their tubes, even to the point that if a woodcutter were to chop at such a treant, they would be showered in grubs at the mere splitting of their bark.
That is simultaneously gross and amazing. Listeners, we're at episode 3, and we've hit our first true symbiotic relationship.
It's amazing. It's so good.
Tat grubs.
Yeah, and I can't get enough of how much this book has just dove into these ecological and biological structures. It's stuff that, when you're writing a campaign, you don't always think of. You don't always think of getting into those little tiny nitty-gritty details. Sometimes it's just too much to take on.
Absolutely.
But if you do find a way to take on or read something like this, it does give you more ideas. Like, I'm already thinking of, what happens if you encounter a treant that has tube wilt but doesn't have access to rock grubs. Like, how do you help that guy out,
I mean, you find it rock grubs, I think. You cut into a treant with rock grubs.
Well, you get different problems if you're doing that. So
That's crazy.
And then it also goes on to various threats that you wouldn't quite think of for treants, such as brush rats, who were known for digging nests underneath their trunks. You're going to love this. Woodchucks and wood-eating horses. And I have what the fuck written next to that. Yep. Who would chew and eat their bark.
So, my dad's wife raises horses, and they specifically do not eat trees.
Yep.
So far you've got me. Like,
So
you've got like Asian longhorn beetles helping the trees out. Like, you've got hunters, they're a real thing. You've got woodchucks, also a real thing. You're using specific types of real world trees.
Yep.
I've heard of all of these types of trees. And then wood-eating horses.
Wood-eating horses.
Like, why wouldn't you throw like a hippogriff in there or some shit?
This is almost akin to Yetis knowing how to speak Yeti. Like, it's like, where does this come from?
That's pretty good.
And there was nothing else in the book that I could find with a quick search about wood-eating horses. I googled wood-eating horses, and all I could find were articles about people who be concerned about their domesticated horses chewing on, like, the fences, chewing on wood specifically, but nothing about wood-eating, and in particular to the point where they would threaten a treant. Like, these things are massive and powerful. How is that a threat? That's the one thing I really didn't understand.
We don't encourage this often so far, but I feel like it's going to be a running theme going down the show. But maybe just homebrew the shit out of that. Like, just take that and just throw it away. Like, just don't put wood-eating horses in your campaign.
Seriously. But now, here's the cool thing. To combat these threats, rush rats, woodchucks, and the marvelous wood-eating horses, they would actually allow violet fungi to tap into their roots, use their sap as sustenance. And the violet fungi would just, like, hang out in their vicinity. And they're like human-sized mushrooms, somewhere between 4 and 7 feet tall. And the ones that's the typical violet fungi. The ones they would use would only stand about 3 feet tall. These were like the ones that you would find in Corminthor. And they would allow up to 6 or so to attach them, typically maybe 2 to 3. And it was a cool tactic because the violet fungi would just use their tendrils and lash out at any sort of animals coming into the city, which is a bit strange for a treant. I feel like if they must be under some serious threat from a booming woodchuck population to, like, be willing to just set these things up to attack anything that comes at them.
Yeah, so do they attach the treants directly or the area around the treants?
They attach to their roots. They tap into their roots specifically. So I think what happens is that the treant, like, settles down in a spot and roots in and then allows them to attach. Although I do recall reading that the treants can actually move with the fungus. They can bring the fungus with them. They will travel with them in some way.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
So back to the violet fungi. Do they exist in D&D still? Like the rock grubs? Are they?
Yeah, I believe so. I'm pretty sure they're on the fungi page. I didn't dive too far into it because all it just talked about was, their basic function. I believe they lash out with tendrils that tries to, but they basically rot the flesh of any creatures coming in when they attack them.
Wow, that is an extreme reaction to a horse that just wants a meal.
A really chewy meal.
Have some necrotic damage, bitch.
Yeah, seriously. And there is actually, I recommend anyone can get their hands on Elminster's Ecology. There is a very amazingly simplistic sketch of a treant and its threats. And the violet fungus it's all on page 28 of Elminster's Ecology.
And we'll try and find a link to that, whether it's an Amazon link or an eBay link.
It is very simple. It's kind of like laughably simple, but it gets the point across. It's pretty good. Among other, there's just a couple more threats too: bark beetles and leaf ants, which would kind of make sense. You said some of the Asian
longhorn beetle,
Longhorn beetle, yeah.
Yeah, they're an invasive species in North America for the last couple of years. They've been a real problem with the evergreen population.
Bastards.
Correct me on that,
Yeah.
etymologist.
We'll have to talk to some of our local treants and see what's up.
Entomologist. Correct me on that, entomologist.
Entomologist is...
Etymologist,
is
do not
bugs.
you fucking dare correct me on that.
Too bad. To combat these, they would let bats and azimuths, which were a second edition deep bat, to make homes in their branches. So they would just eat the bugs. And then there were black squirrels that would chew on shoot stalks. So this is very specific to the second edition lore. They specifically fed on female treants, which helped to limit treant populations. So this is confusing because there was no mention of gender or mating habits at all, other than this one spot. But these shoots apparently could become new treants.
I don't understand at all. We need to take a minute to break this down because I'm lost. So the only way you can make a treant is through an awaken spell.
So this is no. It's not a spell, and this is 5e lore specifically. A tree will awaken.
Yeah.
And they sort of there's no circumstance specified as to what creates the potential for them to awaken, but basically it says any tree can.
Okay.
Maybe a select few of trees have potential, but they don't tell you what select few trees those are.
Do trees have gender?
This is the only.
I mean, like in our world, do trees have gender?
I don't think so. Not that I know of.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. I'm no arborealist. That's a word.
Arborist.
Damn it.
And I don't think that is the right word. I think that's... Anyway, let's... but, okay.
Yeah, it's...
So any tree can awaken, but those trees are male or female?
Maybe, as far as I know. Again, so we're this is a 5th edition, 2nd edition. They are very divided on this one for sure.
Okay.
Like the 5th edition is much more vague, and this one is not really much less because this is the only thing it mentions about gender. It does not specify mating habits of any kind, and it doesn't say anything about like actually defending themselves against these black squirrels. It says it actually helps limit the treant population as if they could be too many. This seems to imply so. It's just a strange point.
Right in with your ideas, listeners.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the awaken spell earlier, and I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit further down the line. So,
and then from that, we're getting to the in real life lore, IRL. And I think we all know treants are directly inspired by Ents from Tolkien, the Middle Earth and Arda mythos.
Yeah. So we're not 100% sure what the legalities of talking about or using this mythos are, but this is completely an homage. We defer all credit to the Tolkien estate. John, I love your work. Most of it. Some of it's a little tough, but please don't we're not going to get this real very often, I don't think, but please don't sue us. Just send us a cease and desist if there's a problem, and we'll just take this episode down.
If there's a problem, we will reinvent Ents just like Gary Gygax did. And we will just pretend treants are influenced from them.
Yeah, we'll just cut out every part where we say the word Ent and replace it with the Benny Hill theme song.
In full.
In full, yeah. Okay, so there's our Tolkienian estate disclaimer.
Disclaimer, okay, perfect. And with that, this is brought to you by Strange Fellows Milk Stout, Blackmail Milk Stout, our favorite beverage.
Definitely not actually brought to you by Strange Fellows Milk Stout.
Definitely not. But
Yet.
Not yet.
Yet.
And we need these beers right now because we might get sued.
Yeah, we probably won't, I think.
Nah, I don't
I mean, it's...
We're small potatoes, let's be honest.
It's just tough when they have such a history of hurting people. Please don't sue some of that last bit either. Okay.
They get jokes, right? Anyway, we'll just get right into it. We'll just do it. We're just going to do it. Bite the bullet and do it.
Okay. Treants.
Treants are influenced by Ents. Ent comes specifically from the Anglo-Saxon word ent, which means giant. Just so you know.
Yeah. Probably the same rude word as etten.
See that? We're going to get into that in another episode, and I promise you that. I've already given you a bit of a sneak peek on that one. There's an etymology black hole when it comes to this stuff. But I do have a couple cool little notes on the word. In Anglo-Saxon sense, when it was used, it really would encompass a massive amount of myths and lore across the world, including what you would commonly call trolls and giants, and could be used for either of those. And it's possible that even Grendel from Beowulf would have been at the time referenced to as an Ent. And Tolkien has specifically said that he took the word Ent from two Anglo-Saxon phrases. I really don't know how to pronounce these very well, and one's got a really weird character. I think it's Orsank or think. Enta Gewerk, which means work of cunning giants. And the other phrase is Eld Enta Gewerk, mean old work of giants. And that second phrase was used specifically to describe Roman ruins in the Anglo-Saxon period. So just as, obviously, it just references giant, especially in size. Now, we all know probably who Treebeard is from Lord of the Rings, and he was described by Gandalf as the oldest living Ent and oldest living being that walks Middle-earth. And he was about 14 feet tall, or 4 meters. There's an excerpt I'll read here from...
That's not particularly tall.
No.
That's just a large creature.
I think, actually, to be honest, I think above ground, the average telephone pole is about 14 feet.
Okay.
It's 14 to 16 or something like that.
Yeah, that's like a large creature.
Yeah.
That might be a huge creature, but I think it's a large creature.
Yeah, I can tell you in advance that these guys are huge in the mechanics.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, little excerpt from Two Towers, Book 2, Chapter 3. A large man-like, almost troll-like figure, at least 14 foot high, very sturdy, with a tall head and hardly any neck. Whether it was clad in stuff like green and grey bark, or whatever that was its hide, was difficult to say. At any rate, the arms, at a short distance from the trunk, were not wrinkled, but covered with brown smooth skin. The large feet had 7 toes each. The lower part of the long face was covered with a sweeping grey beard, bushy, almost twiggy at the roots, thin and mossy at the ends, but at the moment the hobbits noted little but the eyes. These deep eyes were now surveying them, slow and solemn, but very penetrating. And this is very cool to me because these guys have skin that looks like bark. They have a beard that resembles twiggy roots. And the biological makeup of an Ent versus a Treant is actually quite different. Just before we dive into that, I want to give just a really quick breakdown of sort of the importance of where these Ents stand on the hierarchy of like the creation of the world of Arda and in the Tolkien universe. Basically, you have Eru Iluvatar, who's the Cimbri being who created the Ainur. I'm not going to know how to pronounce any of these, by the way. The Ainur with a mere thought. The Ainur, through what's called the music of the Ainur, created the earth, known as Arda. And 14 specifically of these Ainur became concerned with their creation and entered the world itself to complete its material development. These Ainur were divided up into two groups, the Valar and the Maiar, and they were the guardians of creation. And the Maiar were lesser versions of Ainur, essentially, and Gandalf himself was one of these Maiars. So very, very powerful beings. He was eventually assigned as an Istari, which is Quenya, which is the Elvish language word for wise ones or wizards, by the king of the Valar. So one of the superior ones dictated that he would play the role alongside Saruman and Radagast and the two Blues. Essentially,
I understood none of that.
There's definitely some nerds out there who are probably like, you got something wrong and you're not pronouncing it right, but they definitely know what's going on. In any case, Supreme Being creates the next level of Supreme Beings. They create the world. They enter the world. And it's these Supreme Beings that Gandalf is a member of, which I think a lot of people miss, especially if you've only really seen the films and they don't really go too deep into the book. He is extraordinarily powerful, and he's not just a human with some studied magical powers. He is far beyond that. And Ents, basically, in the world of Tolkien, appeared around the same time as elves. And basically, one of the Valar requested another one to create them, because she was afraid that when the dwarves were created by yet another Valar, like she foresaw that they would fell the trees. So she requested that these creatures be created to shepherd the trees and protect them from dwarves and others. So the Ents were created by one of these extraordinary powerful beings, the Valar, not the Maiar, one of the big ones, at the behest of another. So these things are like high up there. No wonder they're ancient. No wonder they're wise and they've been around for so long.
So I've got two questions for you. I'm not sure if either of them are important.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, so you're telling me Gandalf is an angel?
More or less.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second of all, do you have a source for this? Like, where was all this?
So I'm picking pretty much all of this out of just the general Wikipedia page.
Okay.
Of course, has all its own sources. A lot of this is likely coming from the Silmarillion.
I don't remember any of that from the Silmarillion.
Oh yeah, no way. So
I mean, maybe the Silmarillion tends to focus on the crafting of the One Ring and
I've never read it, so yeah.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the formation of the 4 main kingdoms.
Well, I imagine it's coming from a lot of books that were published on just Tolkien's notes in general.
Yeah, that must be it. So check out the Wikipedia page. We'll link that in the description.
It's definitely through various pages, clicking on Valar and the Ainur and that sort of thing. I just read through. So yeah, it's all referenced stuff through the official Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
So from there, they are sentient at the time of their awakening. And this word is specifically used. But when they became awakened, they did not know speech and they had to be taught by the elves. And Treebeard specifically says that elves cured them of their dumbness, and it was a great gift that could not be forgotten. He also mentions the old elves wished to talk to everything. They were also individually known to shepherd types of trees and bear the resemblance of said trees.
Okay, so like an avatar of the maples.
Exactly, yeah. And so this is where their physical makeup starts to come into account. Like they're looking like these specific types of trees, but they aren't themselves trees like treants are, which I thought was pretty cool. We do hear about Quickbeam, is a really young and hasty ent that Treebeard mentions, and he resembles and shepherded rowan trees. And rowan trees are from the rose family and are a flowering tree that blossoms from May to June, and their palms or apples ripen from August to October. And I kind of thought maybe the short periods of their influence was apparent in the hastiness of Quickbeam. It was very specific. I ended up looking up trees. Come on.
Yeah. No, this is great. I don't mean to push you off it, but we're not a Tolkienian show.
Yeah.
I don't think we legally could be.
Definitely not.
Can I bring you back to Treants?
Yeah, we definitely could. I think I'd just go through maybe just one description. Again, it's an excerpt, and we can cut it later if we need to. From the Two Towers again, it's about Treebeard, I believe. Ents such as Treebeard were like beech trees or oaks. There were other kinds. Some recalled the chestnut, brown-skinned Ents with large splay-fingered hands and short, thick legs. Some recalled the ash, tall, straight grey Ents with many fingered hands and long legs. Some the fir, the tallest Ents, and others the birch and the linden. And there's a lot of talk about in the Tolkien lore about how tough their skin is, super super tough, and it erodes stone at a rapid rate. It's vulnerable to fire and chopping axes, which I thought was kind of interesting. Kind of a thought for a debate. In 5e you'd have an axe would be slashing damage, but you wouldn't do a sword against a tree like that. Like a long sword, it probably wouldn't be effective. So there's probably a bit of a ground for home brewing rules in that. And then of course we get into the communication of Ents and the Ent moot, and there's a whole bunch of information on gender when it comes to Ents as well, which lightly touched on in Elminster psychology. There's so much shit in there, and there's female Ents and how they're gone. There's trees that are like Ents called Huorns, and Huorns that and Ents that are like tree. It gets gnarly, man. It's so crazy.
Full disclosure, because I'm not sure you know this about me, and just so the listeners know right away, I am not a fan of Tolkien's writing. I've read The Silmarillion, The Lord of the Rings, and The Hobbit, and I just do not like his work. He's a brilliant guy, and the worlds he builds are so immense, and they're beautiful, and they're fantastic. But fuck reading about
Oh, man.
It's just so much work. It is not enjoyable to me.
I think it's pretty relatively common opinion that Tolkien was not a great fantasy writer. He was a linguist first, I believe.
Very much so.
And, and just had these beautiful ideas that he was just telling these stories to his kids, essentially, as they were growing up, and his grandkids.
He was definitely more of a poet, but not in the vein of poetry that I enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. I've read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I haven't gone as far as trying the Silmarillion or anything, but
it's harder somehow.
But I do remember there were parts of just him describing a land. I'm just like, okay, I've got enough of it. I've got enough.
12 pages on the field of Rowan. Shut up already.
Seriously,
should have been a dungeon master.
But yeah, it really dives in to so much stuff. there's so much detail surrounding, how their relationship between the mortal creatures and stuff like that. And there was a separation between Ents and the Ent wives in actual social opinion. And then when Sauron came running through, basically the Ent wives are believed to have all been slaughtered.
Oh,
in the process.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's the first time Sauron came through.
Okay.
So by the time we see, Frodo and entered the stuff in the Hobbits meeting Treebeard, that's all, way back when. Still, the Treants have still been kicking around since then.
Yeah.
Or the Ents, sorry.
Oh yeah, because that was a couple of thousand years earlier.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Sauron's the only interesting character in that book.
Oh, I think I even have notes somewhere in here about where he sits into that hierarchy. It's pretty ridiculous. Like one of the Valar was.
Stay tuned for our spin-off podcast.
No, God, no! I can't do it. It's too much. So this, I think, just brings us straight to a quick chat about the differences and similarities in lore. Right away, Treants are trees, specifically, whereas Ents are completely separate beings meant to shepherd trees and protect them. They're both obviously protecting them and doing their best, very passionate about that, and they do, live for, centuries, probably millennia. But Ents are very much a separate creature that ends up resembling a tree, but they have their own skin, they have their own biological, ticks and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I almost picture a treant like an enlarged Duragar, like a giant, dark-skinned stone dwarf.
Oh, yeah.
After that description.
Oh, sure, yeah, okay. I have to wonder if in Elminster's ecology, the specificity of their tubes running through into important parts of the body was influenced by the fact that Ents were separate beings from trees.
I think it would have to be. There is also like a Venus system in leaves and stuff like that. That does that kind of thing. So I wonder if that's where that comes from, or if it's just helping to further separate themselves from Ents. Because I think that was why this book was so in depth, was to really separate. We're not stealing your shit, Token.
Yeah. One thing's for sure, there's no description on mating habits in either lore. Even when you dive into the Ent wives, they don't talk about how they reproduce at all.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't need that.
Ent Kama Sutra.
Rule 34. It probably exists. Yeah. I think that's what Rule 34 is.
Well, 5e Treants do have females that can have shoots that turn into new Treants, apparently. But there is nothing stating that this is required to create more. It seems more likely that any tree has the potential to become great and awaken, like we discussed earlier.
So that's why the squirrels eat the shoots.
And again, that's the second edition lore. That's what it specifies. Right. And it's the only mention of it, and it kept their population in check, apparently. Tolkien does not describe anything about the mating habits of Ents at all, and Ent wives. You will recall probably the Entmoot from Lord of the Rings, where they decided not to attack Isengard. And there is this sort of important part, I feel like, when it comes to Ents, and the slow, time to them is kind of irrelevant. Everything passes, so slowly, and it doesn't really matter. So they take forever. It takes 3 days to make the decision, and then they decide not to go. And the fact that Treants can sit there in the soil for decades or centuries before they even become awakened, and even then they'll still sit there for a long time. And so the passage of time doesn't make a huge difference to them. But I like that when they're aroused, they can really go at it, and they can really with some speed. Because in that moment in Lord of the Rings, when Treebeard and the hobbits reach Isengard, he sees how much of the forest has been torn away. I remember he says specifically, he's like, some of these trees were my friends. And he howls out. And these Ents, and I think they traveled for weeks to get to Isengard, from where the Entmoot was. And within moments, Ents were clambering out of the forest. And for who knows what sort of distances and what sort of amount of time, they could move at an immense speed if they really wanted to. And I thought that was really appropriate too. With the, you don't fuck with the awakening of a tree in the 5e lore, because, you're gonna see what happens.
Yeah, I think you'll regret awakening anything that is that old and that sturdy. Trees, if trees were sentient, they would be terrifying. Mm-hmm. They're beasts of creatures. It takes dozens of axe chops. It's so hard to chop one down with a straight blade, with an axe, something that's designed to hack away at things, that we went out and invented a gas-powered saw.
Right.
It's just that hard. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have ever tried to split wood or anything like that, but it's not easy. I'm not a weak guy.
Treat. Yeah. But in any case, that's on to mechanics for now.
Excellent. This is where I get.
You've been
really
waiting for
excited.
this.
Yeah, I love this drink.
Yeah. So there isn't a huge amount of crazy mechanics. They have one big one, which I think is pretty cool. They are CR9 to start off. Their major stats are strength, con, and wisdom, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that really adds up with the lore.
Mm-hmm. And subtype and size, you're looking at plant and huge. Alignment is chaotic good.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think chaotic makes sense because they're not really looking to care about the laws of the land of any other creatures. They don't have any laws or codes themselves other than just protect, the forests.
Yeah, I always forget that that's the difference between chaotic and lawful. Like, it's just either follow the rule of the law or you don't.
Yeah, more or less. And whether that law is like, one of the government in the city or if it's a personal code of honor, those are laws that can make you lawful. But chaotic is the sort of...
So you could be lawful in one region and chaotic in another.
Kind of, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where I think neutrality and evil kind of slips in there as well. So they did know several languages: Common, Druidic, Elvish, and Sylvan. So I think it's pretty cool, the new Druidic.
That is an interesting one. I wonder if they're the origin of the Druidic language.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't say anything about that, but it almost would make sense, right? Maybe the Elves...
Maybe them and the Dryad.
Yeah.
Maybe Druidic is just a form of Elvish that's been lost to time.
Yeah, it could be. I did note specifically here they do not have their own Treant language. So there's one up on them from the Yetis.
Yeah, that makes me feel better. I'll be able to sleep tonight now. But Sylvan's an interesting choice.
Sylvan, yeah. I mean, but there was some specificity about them them having a relationship with anything that's basically related to the Fae, Dryads in particular.
Yeah, but them not being fake creatures themselves is interesting.
Yeah, I guess they would just probably keep in constant communication with creatures like that at the end of the day who are, basically have the same outlook on the forest.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, basic senses, they have passive perception of 13, nothing too crazy. Resistances to bludgeoning and piercing, which kind of brings me straight back to what we talked about earlier with slashing damage, maybe vulnerable to axes, but not necessarily swords. That's something you could definitely shop in there yourself.
Yeah, I mean, something like a greatsword is... So all the weapons, specifically the swords in D&D, are named wrong. So a greatsword is technically a long sword, and a long sword is technically an arming sword.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that here. But a two-handed sword is designed for slashing/bludgeoning damage. So a greatsword is designed to actually smash through armor.
Right.
Like, they're not pokey, they're not dueling. So I think something like that would also have the same kind of effect.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Totally fair. Definitely something to play with, but realistically, keep it simple for yourselves and just go with the stats on the page. We like to overthink things. That's why we're doing this podcast.
That's exactly why we're here.
Yeah. No immunities, but typical vulnerability to fire. And maybe axes. They do have a couple of traits.
I like you just snuck that in there.
A couple of traits. They have what's called false appearance. So as long as they're standing still, you cannot discern them from a regular tree. Which I found a little bit strange, considering it specifically says in the lore that even before they awaken, they start to form arms, legs, and faces. So it can't be distinguished at all. I guess maybe they can hide those features.
Yeah, so I think that probably comes from like the Green Man lore, which I don't know too much about. But having walked through enough forests in my life, I'll see faces in trees and things that aren't there.
Sure, yeah.
Things that mimic that. So maybe it's not the fact that they're hiding; it's the fact that they're playing off some sort of fey-ish charm magic where you just don't look too closely at it.
Or it could be as simple, maybe simpler than that, when you walk through the forest and you see a tree with various knots in just the right order and shape that you see the resemblance of a visage of some kind, and maybe the awakening of a treant would form those when normally that tree wouldn't have if it wasn't perceiving the potential or something like that. So yeah.
I'm just thinking about like them being in the wrong spots and the eyes being like not level anymore and the mouth being sideways and just this goofy looking treant.
That's how I pictured them. They're not pretty creatures. Majestic maybe, but not pretty. They're also siege monsters, so when taking down buildings, large objects, I guess.
Was that a mechanic?
It is a mechanic. So siege monsters, they will do double damage to objects and structures. So I would imagine things, like any kind of catapults or siege equipment, but also they can siege themselves, so you're looking at tearing down castle walls or something like that.
Now I'm thinking about a wood elf druid riding one of these things in a battle.
Just like the hobbits. Yeah. Which also, I just have to plug it again, the fact that the Ents in Tolkien lore, they could erode stone, with their might, essentially, at an alarming rate, a rapid rate. So, siege monster, I don't know, just the immense strength, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, let's be clear, these things are Ents. They're just a copyright-friendly version.
Essentially, yeah, just like halflings.
Yeah, just like halflings.
Just like halflings. And then we get into their actions. They have multi-attack, which means they can do 2 slams. Slam is at 3d6 plus 6 bludgeoning.
That's not too bad for a CR9.
Not too bad. You get 2 of them in a row. It's it can be kind of hefty. They also have rock. Probably should be called throw rock or something, but it's literally just called rock in the book. They throw a rock, boulder, or some such. 4d10 plus 6.
All right.
Yeah, pretty solid.
You see a lot of boulders in the woods.
Loads of boulders. And we've got animate trees. This is the one mechanic that terrifies me.
Okay, so talk to me about animate trees.
So only once per day, but they can magically animate up to 2 nearby trees.
Once per day feels like enough.
Yep. The stats are the exact same as the Treant, with the exception of intelligence and charisma are 1. They cannot speak. They can only slam. And they act as an ally to the Treant. Lasts for a whole day, or until death, or until 120 feet from the Treant, or the Treant takes a bonus action to dismiss. And when it is finished, it tries to take root if possible. It basically can create 2 versions of itself extra if there's trees around.
So that explains why it's a CR9
It's ridiculous.
Holy shit.
You can be very quickly overwhelmed by that. Imagine all of them doing 2 slam attacks at you, just like pummeling you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because those would be CR9 creatures as well, even without the rock thrower or the animate. Holy shit.
Ridiculous.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
What's the AC on these guys?
AC is 16 natural armor, so pretty easy to hit.
Okay, so that's not too
30-foot speed, pretty average.
I got their hit points pulled up here, and that's not too bad either.
138 standard.
138 for a CR9 creature.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are reasonable to deal with, but like if you're dealing with 3 of those, you're dealing with almost 600 hit points.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Taking one down might not be too hard, but you might lose a PC or 2 on the way if it goes awry.
So they've got an intelligence of 12, so that means they're going to be aware of some sort of battle tactics as well. Like,
for
can
sure.
you imagine these 2 little guys flanking you while the other one's just hanging back, throwing rocks?
Absolutely.
Like, that's a quick way to take down a fighter.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh.
And then from there, I mean, we talk about how the mechanics are reflective of the lore. I think it's all pretty above board. Stats and resistances are in line. Vulnerability to fire, baby axes.
Yeah, I don't want to be the one who brings it back to Token, but I think this Awakened Trees is specifically from that part of 2 Towers where Treebeard yells and then.
Well, no, I have a point about that because he yells out, and I mean, I see the reference for sure, but those are definitely
those are definitely Ents. But I see this
Mm-hmm.
as being the way to reflect that from wherever you are, just automatically getting
like
teamwork.
I had another basic or sort of loose influence that I kind of thought in there, but Huorns were these really incredible trees in the forest, and they. Kind of touched on it briefly, where Ents would become tree-like. Huorns were trees that would become Ent-like, and they could communicate.
Oh.
Yeah. So animate trees made me think of that, because they don't have the intelligence, they don't have the charisma, they don't have the ability to function on their own. But here you can animate them and move them forward. So they reminded me of Huorns from the Tolkien universe.
So you can create slave trees out of regular trees.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I love that it touches on it when it finishes. They will root if possible.
Yeah.
It just makes me think of what kind of circumstance could you get that treant into, or those trees where, is this treant like on your side, or you end up traveling into the mountains, and these trees are they're on the treant side for a full day.
Yeah.
But by the time that day is done, or maybe the treant dies along the way and you're on rocky terrain, those trees can't root back down and they will die.
For sure. Or maybe you're sieging the 2nd level of a castle or something like that.
Right.
The treant falls and they immediately try and take root and
boom, fall over.
Just fall over.
Crush a few more enemies along the way.
Party members, depending on how the dice roll.
And your hopes, definitely, depending on what side of the table you're on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's touch on the Awaken spell, because I think this is a very interesting spell in regards to how the Treant description is worded. So this is a 5th level transmutation. It's a touch spell. It's a bard or druid spell. But essentially, you can awaken a tree or a shrub or something along those lines to have an intelligence score of 3. Do we think that this was specifically worded under the Treant entry to show that this spell could eventually cause a Treant?
Yeah, I wonder if... excuse me. Brought to you by Blackmail Stout. I wonder if what came first, the awaken concept for the tree, or the invention of the awaken spell. I wonder when the awaken spell entered the game and what edition.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have that information in front of me, but I like the idea of, like, the last sentence under the spell description is, when the charm condition ends, the awakened creature chooses whether to remain friendly to you based on how it was treated while it was charmed. So that, it doesn't go away. The awakened spell doesn't go away. It's the charm effect from the awakened spell that goes away.
Okay. Oh, right. That is interesting.
Yeah. So I think this could be a solid, like, an accidental plot hook to, okay, you've now formed a treant or a blueberry ant.
Yes.
You awaken a blueberry bush.
Rose bush ant.
Yeah. Or maybe it goes sour and you create something like a corpse flower. Like maybe that's what happens when the awaken ends, if you're hostile towards the treant. Or if you're good, it becomes this nice, gentle treant. If you're bad, it becomes like a corpse flower or something like that.
I think at the very least we can probably say it's safe to assume that one influenced the other, especially wording-wise. Whichever one came first, I think it's pretty evident that awaken was specifically used for both.
I think so, and I like the idea of this a lot. And it consumes a gem worth 1,000 gold pieces. So it's not a cheap spell. I mean, I guess by the time you're casting 5th level spells, it's a pretty cheap spell. Mm-hmm. And it takes 8 hours to cast.
8 hours?
Yeah, so essentially this is a ritual spell without being a ritual spell. So you've essentially got to touch a tree for 8 hours.
Just fondling it.
Just gem in one hand, just rubbing the bark in
trying to understand how they reproduce.
Trying to figure out how to get it to move. I don't think I could touch anything for 8 hours straight. I don't think a bard could touch anything for 8 hours straight, but a druid probably.
That's a joke. That's a joke for our pubescent listeners.
Yeah. There you go. That's not how I meant it.
I know.
But the duration is instantaneous. That's interesting. So you channel the spell for 8 hours, and then you touch, and then it's automatically pushed into this tree.
Damn.
That's an interesting mechanic. I don't look at spells nearly hard enough.
There's just a lot of them have so many words, though.
Yeah.
We're not here for words. Damn it.
We're here to listen to words.
Listen to words, yeah.
So, how do you feel about the Awakened spell? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's... I mean, I feel like I have to read it over a couple times again to really have it set in. But I think it is kind of cool. It also makes me think of how it specifies that the awakened trees mechanic, or the animate trees mechanic, those trees are specifically the ally of the treant. So it's very reflective of that spell. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of options that you could just work with that. What size creature does it require? Huge or smaller? That's gnarly. Yeah,
so that's what I'm thinking. That's why I'm thinking you can awake a treant through this awakened spell.
Yeah, you could at least help one along, I would imagine, even. If there's already one showing potential, imagine a scenario in a game where there is a potential one, you come across maybe some druids, dryads, and or treants that are protecting it, and maybe something has gone awry, something's gone wrong, and they can't quite figure out why, and you have the power to help it along.
Yeah. So now that you mentioned that, let's touch on what happens when a treant goes awry. So now we're actually going to be digging into a 5th edition supplement. This is a creature called a Mandriano. It's from the Creature Codex by Kobold Press. I love this creature. So this creature is essentially what happens when treants are defiled by ritual sacrifice. So if you have a treant and you bury a sacrificed body essentially at its base, you're going to create this Mandriano instead of a treant. So I thought that was just super cool. That's a really interesting take on a classic creature. These are also plants. These are only large though. They're lawful evil. They have a -2 to charisma, which is choice. They're not particularly big creatures. They're only a CR5.
Okay.
And it understands Common and Sylvan, so it's like halfway to being a treant, but it can't speak any of them like a treant can. So the thing about the Mandriano that's really interesting, we're not going to really go into deep. This isn't going to be a 2 for episode. But they have this ability called Consume the Spark, where it grapples you, and it's a con save, or you take necrotic damage. And then that reduces your maximum HP. If your maximum HP is reduced to 0, you are then reanimated as a zombie skeleton. And it can use that energy to create more Mandrianas. One of their abilities is called Never Alone, or one of their abouts is Never Alone.
These skeletons
tend to work in pairs. No, the Mandrianas.
Oh, okay.
They're just a really, really cool. So if this ritual goes awry and one Treant is awakened wrong, like I think this is a really great option if you really want to play with that.
Yeah, I mean, I recall fighting this creature in particular. Like the buildup was undead, and these skeletons with this sort of. In my head, I remember there was like an orb or something in their hand.
Oh, it was in their chest. They're another Cobalt Press creature. I've been branching out from D&D.
Oh, okay. I thought they were directly related to the Mandriana.
No, those are just really cool skeletons.
Yeah. Anyway, it was a very dramatic fight. And I think we were on level 4 at the time, so it was a pretty hefty battle. We had a lot coming at us from all sides, and this Mandriana just kind of came up right at our feet, essentially, from... I think you had him underground or something. There was a lot of turned over soil.
It was the tree. The tree.
Had uprooted.
Uprooted. Yeah. And like undead, they're resistant to necrotic, which is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So they definitely fall within that plant necrotic.
Yeah.
Plant undead sphere.
What about regular treants? Have you ever done anything with them?
I've always wanted to, but I've never really found the right encounter.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure what their place in my world is at the moment. Mm-hmm. I think of them as like forest guardians, but I don't think they would just guard any forest. I think in my homebrew world, now that we're talking about it, and I've been thinking about it throughout this whole episode, I think I've decided that they're going to guard forests that acts as portals into the Feywild, or the elemental plane of Earth. I haven't really decided yet. But I think I'm going to treat them as like venerated guardians, and that's why the sprites flock to them. That's why these fungus work for them. When the new Spore Druid comes out in Unearthed Arcana, I think that they're going to be part of that, and I'm just going to create this ecology around the Treant, but the Treant is there to guard this portal into the Feywild, and it's the magic coming from the portal that awakens them. I think that's the route I'm going to take, but I haven't actually used the Treant personally in combat. What about you? Have you...
Had a really, really obscure one with the... Basically, I had this group in Australia that we were on rails. We had limited time to finish this sort of mini campaign, and one of the creatures they had to search down for information was a character named Morris Moss, and they didn't know who Morris Moss was. And yes, that is a reference to the IT crowd.
Deep cut there. Deep cut fans.
Yeah, and once they found him, they were already set upon by sprites, essentially. And I won't actually dive too far into that part of it, because I think eventually I'll end up doing sprites just so I can. But essentially, Morris decided to help them and was guiding them towards another destination they needed, but then he sensed evil in the forest. And so they verged off and ended up rediscovering the old home of the druid in the party. And it's just this small hovel in a clearing in the forest. And this druid, we had homebrewed quite a bit around him, and he had a partial vampiric curse, and with the potential of becoming a full druid vampire. And it was a hell of a homebrew, and we only did up to a certain level because we weren't sure how high we were going to get, but it ended up being pretty fun and pretty cool. But when we got there, they ran into a vampire, and he believes to be the vampire that, essentially is his progenitor or his father. And there was a whole sort of standoff moment where everyone's kind of talking, no one's quite sure what to do, and this druidic vampire wants to learn more, so he's asking questions, and everyone else is like, no, that's evil, let's kill it. And this whole time they've got Morris Moss at their back, this giant treant, just ready to go. And at this time the vampire's way out of their league. It's probably I can't remember, the CR11 or something, CR9 maybe?
Yeah, I think vampires are CR9.
Yeah, and these guys might have been level 5 at the time, something. So this is a threat they really want to be careful with. Someone ended up casting the silence spell on him to shut him up.
Oh.
Yeah, and a couple people tried to swing at him, but missed. And then I recall the silence spell just activated, and the vampire said, "You know what? Fuck it," and he just went at them. To my chagrin, the players were kicking its ass.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't believe it. They were actually beating the shit out of him. And I ended up creating this really flavorful scenario that was directly influenced by the green men from the first book in The Wheel of Time.
Oh, okay.
At the very end of that book, when they discover that 2 of the Forsaken have escaped, the Green Man kills one of them by like grabbing him, and if I recall correctly, he smashes him into his own like chest and was like beating him on the ground and just like it just beats him. But yeah, I just remember the way he had killed one of these powerful beings. It was like really stunning for one of these things these guys to have escaped, and the way he just obliterated him. But in the process, he also himself was destroyed from the immense magical power of this Forsaken, and I loved that. So what I ended up doing was I basically had, for lack of a better word, had the vampire in rage, and he just started mopping the floor with everyone, and they couldn't do anything. It was all very dramatic, flavorful, and cinematic. But eventually, Morris got up there and grabbed him and just started smashing him into his own chest. And then I had him use the animate tree spell. And here they are in the center of this clearing. The animate trees come barreling out of the forest and just smash into Morris Moss's chest as well, and like enclosing him into basically a animated tree like cage, and they just kind of clambered together and infused together and smothered the vampire, which then Morris Moss falls over and he just starts to like wilt and rot in front of everybody, and the vampire's no more, but then neither is the Treant, and it's left in the middle of this clearing is this giant dead tree essentially that's toppled over, and like the players were blown away, and the bard who cast the silence spell was so upset. He's like, and I told him after the session, he was like, Morris Moss didn't have to die. He's like, what? That was bad. It was very dramatic.
That's fantastic.
I actually, just before we did this episode, I reached out to them to get some more tidbits of everything because I had forgotten anything, and we literally spent the whole time just blaming him for Morris Moss's death. And he's still so upset about it. That's great.
That's fantastic. Do you have anything else about Treants for us today?
That's it for me.
Okay, that's going to do it for Encounter This for this week. Our episode is definitely not brought to you by the Tolkien Estate, Strange Fellows Blackmail Beer. Quick shout out to Brandon Sanderson for finishing the Wheel of Time series. Thank you, bro, and thank you for the Elementor series. That's been fantastic. I don't think we actually have a sponsor this week, but this week's episode is brought to you by our new setup. We're face-to-face for the first time ever, and it's been nice.
Good times.
Yeah, so make sure you like and rate and review us on iTunes. That helps us get a little bit more exposure, brings us to the top of the chart. One of these days we'll have a Patreon. We may have told you for a fact that we had it in the last episode. I don't remember. But one of these days we'll have a Patreon and a website. Right up until then, thank you for listening.
Thanks, creatures.